Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
To be here today
Yes,
on
me
your
too.
Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada series. I'm
Yes.
excited.
Lessons from his Leelas.
Yes. So without much ado and without much time being wasted, there are many who are moving in slowly. And for your information, there's also Bhakti Shastri students. There's also Bhakti Vaibhav students. And there are also Gita courses that I do at different levels. There are students and there are many others who are going to join in, because I thought that nobody should lose the opportunity. So we're trying to tell as many people as possible who are studying Prabhupada's books and who are interested to join up and share and savor the nectar that you're going to spill out as a senior devotee. So I will actually like to briefly introduce His Grace Sureshwar Prabhu Das Vanachari. Am I right, Prabhu?
Vanachari.
Yes. So he's a very, very senior devotee, a disciple of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, the founder of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and been serving for a very long time in the movement, very loyal, very faithful to Prabhupada's teachings, and to bring the Acharya, the founder Acharya, to anybody and everybody, especially those who are practicing Krishna consciousness, which means that he is bringing Prabhupada in a much deeper sense to all of them. And that's what makes it very relishable. You see that Krishna himself is saying that Mad Bhakta Puja Bhyadika, that my devotee should be worshipped. And such a pure devotee like Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, when he is glorified, when his activities are deeply understood or examined or brought out to light, then that is a great service done to Krishna. Because Krishna is very interested, Prabhupada said, in glorifying his own devotees and their amazing devotional services. So this act of sitting through Prabhupada's glorification, I am 100% sure is very pleasing to Krishna and also very purifying to us. And then the opportunity to hear it from somebody who is very senior, who has seen Prabhupada, been with him physically, mentally, through his consciousness, and has assimilated, applied those things for many, many years and had realizations of it, is definitely our great fortune. So His Grace Sureshvara Das Vanachari Prabhu, I remember seeing him way back in Trivandrum when I was a temple president there, briefly. I don't even know, I remember very vaguely. But then I also know that he was doing a tremendous amount of research work for His Holiness Satsvarup Das Goswami Maharaj then, for him to write the Prabhupada's Leelamrita. And therefore I think he was exposed to a lot of details of Prabhupada's life, with dates, happenings, with reasons, with content, intent, and many other things put together. So that's when I met him. And then I later used to read his articles in the Back to Godhead magazine. He's a very brilliant, crisp writer too. Whenever I look at him, I think of an English professor stepping out of the university and speaking English with great clarity and penning his thoughts very clearly into paper without no problems in between, with no bridges left, uncharted. So I think that we have a wonderful wealth of resource today, especially resource of Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So having said that, which is, I think, very less to speak about His Grace Sureshvara Das Manachari Prabhu, I will leave the rest of the time for you to savor Prabhupada's wonderful pastimes from his mouth. And having said that, I'd like to very humbly welcome again His Grace Sureshvara Das Manachari Prabhu. Let's all chant Hare Krishna just once, welcoming him. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Over to you, Sureshvara Das Prabhu.
Thanks so much, Maharaj. With an introduction like that, I hope I don't let everybody down too much. Oh, boy. So, yes, Hare Krishna. So thank you for welcoming me back to your Coimbatore-based Sangha online. Just before Janmashtami back in August, I presented one lesson from a series I developed for Zoom called Srila Prabhupada, Lessons from His Leelas, which tell about the half dozen or so times I witnessed Prabhupada in action, as well as the lessons I derived on reflection. So today, I would like to recall lessons I learned around the time Srila Prabhupada initiated me in Detroit, Michigan. On Saturday, July 17th, 1971. Boy, I was 24 years old. Yeah. It was many years ago. I'll speak for a half hour or so, then invite your questions and comments for discussion. So a couple of days before my initiation, a group of us had driven more than 300 miles to Detroit, where they make all the cars in America, from New Vrindavan, the first ISKCON farm community, where I had been serving since the previous April. On Friday, July 16th, Prabhupada flew in from Los Angeles, but his plane was late to land at Detroit Metro Airport, where our Hare Krishna Kirtan was reaching a fever pitch. Prior to the present age of terrorism, the airport authorities would let us hold wild Kirtan receptions as long as we did not block foot traffic. Even after his plane arrived, everyone got off before Prabhupada. So we became desperate to see him. Actually, although we numbered more than 100, even though there were only, maybe 20 devotees in the Detroit temple, whenever Prabhupada came to a place, people would just descend from all parts. So Detroit is situated on the Great Lakes region, the upper Midwest in America, middle of the country, and right across the Detroit River is Canada, Ontario, Canada. So people came from Ontario, we came up from New Vrindavan, people came from the Midwest, all over the place. So it was about 100 people.
Cozy.
I'm getting feedback. Okay, good. You have to mute. Thank you. So actually, although we numbered more than 100, very few of us had ever seen Prabhupada before. So our anticipation was becoming unbearable. So this was July 71. I had joined a year earlier in July 70 in Boston, the city where Prabhupada first landed in 1965. So I'd been hearing him for a year on recordings, but I'd never seen him. So the plane was late. Prabhupada was probably the last one off the plane. So the anticipation just kept building and building. Suddenly, everyone began bowing down, I noticed. Whole lines of devotees falling flat onto the airport floor. Then I saw Srila Prabhupada, and I too fell flat. Our obeisances were swift and spontaneous, the natural response to seeing something we had never seen before. Absolute power expressed through absolute humility, our one and only Srila Prabhupada. And that was just the beginning. Moving toward our reception, Prabhupada glided up an escalator and appeared to float through a sea of devotees toward a portable Vyasasana in waiting. Now, there were two devotees in that throng that I have since come to know. One of them is very famous, Indradyumna Maharaj, who was famous for his Sankirtan tours and dramatic presentations. And another godbrother named Satyanarayan Prabhu, who's now in charge of Far East, Middle East BBT. He's really focused on printing books in Arabic. Anyway, we were there. We didn't know each other at the time. But since then, we've come to know each other. And Maharaj and Satyanarayan Prabhu and myself, we swear that Prabhupada wasn't touching the ground. We swear he was floating. And we call ourselves charter members of the Prabhupada Floaters Club. So Prabhupada, he glided up the escalator and appeared to be floating through a sea of devotees toward a portable Vyasasana and waiting. I mean, you can't even imagine it today in the age of terrorism, but they let us bring, Vyasasanas, and we could walk right up practically to the plane, and they just let us take over the airport with kirtan, thunderous kirtan. Although he hadn't spoken yet, just by seeing him, we knew that at last, here was a person who would not bluff or cheat us. Amazing. Just by seeing Prabhupada, that purity made us all cry. Just because we knew, here's a real teacher, here's a real person. We were singing and dancing and crying our eyes out. And then he spoke. This is exactly what Prabhupada said. Quote, "The cause of all suffering is due to misidentification with this material body." Unquote. The most basic truth, but Prabhupada said it with such depth of realization that our jaws dropped open. Wow. Lesson 1. So here's the lesson from that little Leela segment. Our founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, even as he walked among us, was not a person of this world. He was, as scripture teaches, in this world, but not of it. Who else but an absolutely pure devotee of the Lord could command such power with such humility? As Prabhupada prayed to Lord Krishna on his sea voyage to America, quote, make me dance, O Lord, make me dance as you like." Srila Prabhupada held initiations that Friday night, but my turn came Saturday morning after a sleepless night of anticipation. Before the ceremony, Prabhupada noticed 2 small boys from New Vrindavan not wearing tilak. Their names were Girish and Birbhadra. They were sons of a senior lady, Vaishnava, named Shalavati. Shalavati was actually the first person that Prabhupada trained in deity worship. even before Jamuna in London the next year. So she was kind of the deity worship Acharya for us for the time. But so she wasn't there, but her sons, Girish and Birbhadra, who were living in New Vrindavan at the time, were there. And they were only, they were only 7 and 9 years old, respectively. But still, His Divine Grace told them to leave the room and go put on tilak. Here is a transcript of that exchange. So this is right from the Bhaktivedanta database. Prabhupada, always remain with tilak, everyone. That is our trademark. Devotees, laughter. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, Hari Bol. Prabhupada laughs. We are selling Krishna for nothing. Devotees, laughter. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Prabhupada, without any price. Still, people are reluctant to take it. What can be done? Devotees, laughter. Prabhupada, yes, so this is our trademark. I remember Prabhupada laughing like Santa Claus, his belly shaking like a bowl full of jelly. And although he was laughing, he was serious about wearing tilak. Lesson 2. To follow Srila Prabhupada means to follow all his instructions, the big ones and the little ones. Tilak might seem like a little thing, but as soon as we wear it, we feel more like devotees. And if we're out in public, we remind everyone of Krishna. So, as Srila Prabhupada began his initiation lecture, unfortunately, I began to drowse from not sleeping the night before. I tried to sit up straight, and then fatigue would overcome me, so I couldn't follow the lecture. After countless births and deaths in the material world, here I was, about to receive a spiritual birth from Srila Prabhupada, a most confidential servant of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. And I was sleeping. Then something happened that woke me up. Clang, clang. In the arms of his mother, a little boy began clanging kartals together. While I was drowsing, Prabhupada had been speaking about how Krishna consciousness continues from life to life. So when the little boy began clanging the kartals, I woke up to hear Prabhupada say, just like this boy, he has had practice. Prabhupada began smiling at the little boy, and the little boy began smiling at Prabhupada. Back and forth went our heads from the boy to Prabhupada and back. As their smiles broadened, we all thought, wow, they know each other from a previous life. Wow. Lesson 3. Because Srila Prabhupada is a pure devotee of the Lord on the highest level of Krishna Prem, his actions on earth were spontaneous and unpredictable. Undisturbed by the child's clanging, Prabhupada chose to use it to teach. In his purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 7.13.14, Prabhupada writes, quote, Vaishnava Kriya Mudra Vigyena Bhujoy. A highly advanced Vaishnav lives in such a way that no one can understand what he is or what he was, nor should attempts be made to understand the past of a Vaishnav, unquote. In his time with us, Prabhupada was always down to earth and out of this world. In the early 1970s, Krishna consciousness was exploding in America, just as it would re-explode later that decade in India and around the world. Because Srila Prabhupada had been away from the US for nearly a year, wherever he visited, dozens of devotees were waiting to be initiated. For those of us he accepted that morning in Detroit, Prabhupada would chant one round on our beads. Then his Sanskrit editor, Pradyumna Prabhu, would announce our birth name. Then, finally, we would come before Srila Prabhupada, who gave us a new initiated name, followed by Das for men or Dasi for women. Suddenly, Pradyumna announced my name, Richard Hall. As soon as I came and knelt before his divine grace, I was completely struck with wonder. Looking at Prabhupada was like looking at the ocean, inconceivably deep and powerful. After he asked me what the 4 rules were and how many rounds I would chant daily on my beads, he gave me my name. So I was very happy to find this recently, this exchange on Prabhupada's audio in the database. And it's just the way I remembered it. So here is exactly what Prabhupada said. Quote, Sureshvara. Sura means demigod, and Ishvara, controller of the demigods, Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma's servant, you are. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. We are always servant. Not that I become Lord Brahma, I am servant of Lord Brahma. Always remember it. Come on, next. So Prabhupada was already calling for the next initiate, but I could not move. I was stunned, looking into Prabhupada's deep brown eyes, Prabhupada's soul eyes. I could feel him looking right through me, through the layers of countless desperate lives, looking straight into my soul. Compassionately accepting me, heart, despite the millennia of perverse desires covering my own heart. Seeing I couldn't move, Prabhupada leaned forward, held out the beads he had just chanted on, and rattled them in front of my nose. Come on, take your beads, come on. The rattling beads snapped me out of my stupor. I took the beads, bowed down again, and crawled away, overwhelmed by what had just happened and trying to remember my name. That was the only time I exchanged words with His Divine Grace. Lesson 4. Although that was my only face-to-face exchange with Srila Prabhupada, it forever fixed my identity as his servant. Because my name is a name for Lord Brahma, the greatest controller in the universe, Prabhupada had stressed that we are always servant, not that I become Lord Brahma. I am servant of Lord Brahma. Always remember it. The instruction was simple yet complete. Whatever we may think we are, the reality is that we are the servants of God's servants. So I'm approaching the end, actually, of what I'm going to present. So you might be thinking, Prabhus, of some questions or comments you'd like to ask. Start formulating them in your mind. Later that summer, I would collect a little dakshin. So I was living at New Vrindavan. So after the initiations that weekend, we drove back to New Vrindavan. And so I found out from our leader at the time, is Kirtanananda Swami. He said, so it's a tradition that the disciple begs some dakshin, some gratitude gift to give to the spiritual master. So it might be hard for you to picture this from where you are in Tamil Nadu, but New Vrindavan is in a state in America called West Virginia. It's where there are a lot of people live in the mountains. It's called Appalachia, and a lot of mountain people. We say hillbillies. And the nearest town to New Vrindavan to this day is a little town called Moundsville, West Virginia. So I went to Little Moundsville, which was just a very small town, with dhoti, tilak, shaved heads. Dhoti, kurta, tilak, shaved head. It was the summer. And my mission was to beg dakshin. Now, it's hard to picture, perhaps, but this culture kind of disconnect. There I was. New Vrindavan at that time was only a couple of years old. They were still getting used to us being there. They thought we were some kind of weird cult. So there I was, a single solo brahmachari wandering the streets of Moundsville, West Virginia. And people just thought I was from Mars because I looked so different than they did. And whenever a brave soul would come up to me, I would try to explain what I was doing, that I was begging Guru Dakshin, Dakshin from my Guru. So they didn't really know what I was saying, but they got the idea that I was soliciting donations. So, they would just give me and these are poor people. So they just gave me some coins, Sometimes they would just throw the coins at me from a distance and run away. They was really scared. And then there was one lady from the newspaper. The newspaper was called the Moundsville Echo. And so she took a picture of me, but she was also afraid. So I saw her head from around a corner of a building, and she had a camera, and she quickly snapped it and then ran away. So I think I was on the cover of the Moundsville Echo. Long story short, it took me an entire day of wandering the few streets of Moundsville, West Virginia, to finally come back to New Vrindavan at the end of the day. I had all of $5 on me, and all of that in coins. So I was practically in tears because I thought this is not befitting dakshin for Prabhupada. But Kirtanananda Maharaj, he said, no, Prabhupada's on the absolute platform. So whether you give him $5 or $5 million, what he's accepting is the bhakti. That's what he appreciates. So encouraged by that, I converted my coins into a postal money order and duly sent the money order in the mail off to Prabhupada. But Prabhupada was always moving in those days. I mean, the whole time with us, he was traveling the world constantly, 14 times in 12 years, nonstop practically. So when I mailed the letter, the dakshin, he was in London. But by the time it caught up to him, a few months later, he was in Nairobi. So in early February 1972, I received my one and only letter from Srila Prabhupada because I had written him. And in the letter with the dakshin, I also asked him if there was a tune I could sing to chant the Bhagavad Gita. God knows what I was expecting. A cassette tape, if you remember that technology. A cassette tape, perhaps, of Prabhupada chanting the Gita. Nonetheless, Prabhupada kindly replied, and this is a direct quote from my letter, quote, the verses of the Gita have a specific melody, but you may choose a suitable tune. Most important is that the melody remains very simple. Another valuable lesson, don't let the melody obscure the meaning of Krishna's words. Keep it simple. Life is complicated enough. Hear the truth of his Gita. And one final point, Prabhu, before I end. Over the years, as I've come to realize more and more Srila Prabhupada's greatness, I understand that my identity is less as his initiated disciple than as his instructed follower. Now, if we all embrace that shared identity as his instructed followers and share it with others, unlimited fortunate souls will be able to follow the path Prabhupada opened wide, back home, back to Godhead. So thank you for listening. If you have any questions or comments now, I would love to hear them. Hare Krishna.
Hari Bol.
Haribol.
Thank you very much for the very sweet experience that you gave us. Brief though, we would have wished that you would continue. You would have continued and on and on. Very sweet experience of your first encounter with a pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada. I just want to set this question thing rolling, so I just wanted to ask a pointed question. I had other questions, but the thing that you ended with, I would be considering myself, you said, I don't know exactly what you said. You said shared identity of not just
as his instructed followers. Yeah.
But more like his instructed follower. I just wanted you to elaborate a little bit on that. What does it mean? That is mean that I also, everyone who follows Prabhupada has a similar relationship, a similar accessibility to Prabhupada, or is it something more for those who are directly initiated by him during his presence at that particular time? To make the question a little more, understandable. Others who may be new and those who are initiated by a initiating guru, and others who are also giving instructions from Prabhupada's books to many others and making them more aligned with Prabhupada's instructions and teachings and life.
Sure.
I hope,
yeah. So, great question. And it's the question that really opens the door for us to all unite around our founder Acharya. We have to remember that Prabhupada is not simply a previous Acharya or a regular guru. He's a Jagat Guru. He's the founder Acharya of our line. And as such, it's Prabhupada's life, his teachings, his mood, his mission that we all can rally around and identify with and find common ground with. Prabhupada never introduced himself as the Diksha Guru of 5,000 ex-hippies. Rather, he would say, my name is Bhaktivedanta Swami. I'm the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So that identity as founder Acharya, that's for all time. He is our founder Acharya. And that's why you might have read GBC resolutions saying that Prabhupada is the foundational Shiksha Guru for all devotees in ISKCON. Everybody's encouraged to have a personal foundational relationship with him. Our shared identity is that we're all Prabhupada Anugas, we're his followers, because we all have different Guru Devs and Guru Maharajas, but it's that common identity as followers of our founder Acharya that will allow us to keep ISKCON together. And you, Prabhus, being from Tamil Nadu, you can relate to this with the Ramanujis. And Bhaktivinoda Maharaj reminded me that when you meet any self-respecting Ramanuji, a strict Ramanuji, to this day, 1,000 years after Ramanuja, you ask the devotee to identify himself, and he would say, what is the word? Adiyen or Adiyan? Adiyen, yeah?
Adiyen. Adiyen means, servant.
Yeah, Adiyen.
Adiyen Ramanujadasan.
Adiyen Ramanujadas. I am your servant, the servant of Ramanuja. Now, of course, the devotee has his Diksha Guru and he has his Shiksha Gurus, but his core identity is with their founder Acharya, Ramanuja. So similarly, we have to take a page out of their book, or we have to this is a good example for us. I mean, the Ramanujis, they're not as extensive as we are, right? I mean, since Prabhupada's time, people, the Madhvas and the Ramanujis, some of their acharyas have been emboldened to cross the ocean and share teachings, etc. But what Prabhupada created is such an extensive global network of ashrams, farms, temples, affiliates, schools, that we really need more than anyone to remember that common shared identity, because we have so many other sub-identities that it could be easy for us to sort of retreat into our little bubbles, our guru bubbles or our project bubbles or whatever. But we have to come together around that shared identity. He lives forever by his divine instructions, and the follower lives with him. Just as the Ramanujis to this day worship the Murti of Ramanuja and study his books and prosecute his Vishishtadvaita mission. So similarly, we read Prabhupada's books, no matter who or where we are, what God families we belong to, or what generations or zones, or we read Prabhupada's books, we come together to worship his Murti at Guru Puja, and we prosecute the mission just in his mood and style, of course, according to time, country, candidate. So Prabhupada, he provides that unity amidst the diversity. He is the unity amid the diversity. It's very important. Or else how is ISKCON going to survive the ravages of time? Look what we've been through in the first, 55 years now, or 54 years since Prabhupada incorporated ISKCON. Been through a lot. So material time is always tending to unravel things and destroy things. Time I am. That's materially. But if we live in the spiritual energy, in the love and the light of Prabhupada's teachings, we don't have to be destroyed by time. We can continue as long as there is that golden age within Kali. So great question, Maharaj. How's that for an answer? Is it okay?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that elaborate answer, Prabhu. Hari.
Hari.
Anybody else with some?
The golden age during Kali is not something that all of us may understand. Maybe a few more words on that would help us, Prabhuji.
Yeah. Prabhupada, he only brought that up once or twice, but he took it from the Brahma Vaivarta Purana, Canto 4, chapter, 129, text 49 through 59. It first came up in 1969 in May. Prabhupada was in Columbus, Ohio, the so-called All-America City. And Prabhupada was there to have a big program, a big kirtan program with the counterculture poet Allen Ginsberg. And actually, now that I think of it, we're going to be, maybe not. I forget now. Let's see. That's another series. Okay, I can tell it. I won't spoil a future lesson. So Prabhupada met Ginsberg, famous counterculture poet. And he was attracted to Prabhupada. And he would introduce Prabhupada to people in San Francisco and New York. And now they were there in Columbus, Ohio, which is a real challenge in terms of it wasn't so progressive. It's a very conservative place, Columbus. So, but anyway, Ginsberg was there, and Ginsberg is talking to Prabhupada about how they're going to do the program, and Ginsberg will introduce the Swami and etc. So Ginsberg is talking to Prabhupada about how can Krishna consciousness really be, could it really be made widely accessible to people? Because Ginsberg, being, part of the counterculture, was thinking that could only really appeal to a certain kind of alternative type of person. It would be too esoteric or exotic for Americans. So Prabhupada said, oh no, actually there's a prophecy, there's a prediction in Brahma Vaivarta Purana that for the next 10,000 years, everybody in the world will take advantage of he said, of Hare Krishna, he said to Ginsburg. Now, that was the only thing he said about that. He said for the next 10,000 years, and that's right in there. It's if you actually, you can Google it, actually, you can go. Now, if you do Google it, what you'll find is there's a whole series of verses, and it's become rather famous now. You might have heard this pastime where Krishna is on the planet. He's just about to leave. And so a spokesperson for all the holy rivers, personified, the goddesses behind it, it was Ganga Devi. She became the spokesperson, and she went to Krishna in Dwarka, and she said, "Oh, my Lord, you've been very merciful to us. Your lotus feet have graced our waters. But when you leave," and she knows that Krishna is about to leave. The Kurukshetra war is over, and Krishna has fulfilled his mission. But when you leave, all these people, all these sinful people of Kali Yuga, they will come and bathe in our sacred waters, and we will become polluted. Kind of like toxic waste, you know how toxic waste is dumped in rivers, unfortunately, in Jamuna. And yeah, so Krishna's response in the text, he says, "Be patient. Be patient." And then the next line is, "After 5,000 years," boy, that's patience, right? "After 5,000 years, I will send my mantra upasaka, my worshiper of the holy name. And he will inspire so many people to take up the chanting of Hare Krishna. And those people that he inspires, he will make so many pure devotees that they will come from all over the world to India, and they will bathe in your sacred waters, and they will purify you of those sinful reactions." So Krishna turned Ganga's words right around on her. She said, "These people are Kali Yuga folks are going to come and pollute us," and so Krishna said, "No, the pure devotees will purify you by bathing in your sacred waters." And then came the last line of the prophecy. And this period of worldwide chanting, Krishna said, will continue for 10,000 years. Though that was the only line Prabhupada told us. Just that last line. He didn't tell us the backstory. He didn't tell us the background, the conversation between Krishna and Ganga. Why? Because that's the caliber of pure devotee that Prabhupada is. Utterly, absolutely transparent to Krishna, never calling attention to himself, always just directing us to the Lord. Because if he had told us the backstory, then we would have turned around and said, "Oh, you're the mantra upasaka, all glories to you." But that wasn't his way. He was just always pointing us to Krishna. Absolutely humble, and therefore absolutely empowered and powerful. Yeah, so wonderful example of Prabhupada's purity and transparency and humility and power. Great question. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare
Most humble and respectful obeisance to you.
Obeisances.
I'm really touched by your relationship with the Srila Prabhupada, that when you said, when you were about to take initiation, and as Maharaj also told, like when we speak about or glorify a devotee, Krishna will be pleased, and the devotee is considered to be my devotee who worships my devotee. Krishna is telling in Bhagavad Gita. And also I could able to recollect Jayanand Prabhu when he was asked about what is your steps that you have taken for going back to Godhead, and his reply was, "I am simply engaged in Srila Prabhupada's mission, and I forgot about it." And as we are all Prabhupada's third generation or fourth generation, we couldn't able to see him or have his association. We could able to get it from devotees like you, and we could able to relish the wonderful moments that you had. And my question is, Prabhu, what could be the simple ways and means that we could always remember Srila Prabhupada? We could always be in touch with him, or
Okay, the question is, since you didn't see Prabhupada physically, how can we always remember him now, years later? It's been, what, 43 years since his Tirobhav. So first, I'd like to remind everyone that, even those of us who were in Prabhupada's physical presence when he was on the planet from 1965 to 1967 was his preaching Leela manifest. Because Prabhupada was always traveling all over the world, we would only usually see him once a year. I mean, with a few exceptions, his personal servants that would come and go. He had several, but they would get more Vapu Sangha. But most of us, we were just seeing Prabhupada once a year. And even then, it was Prabhupada's mercy that we saw him that much, because Prabhupada knew we were so neophyte that it wasn't enough just to, even though he said to us, if you want to know me, read my books. And that is the ultimate answer to your question. If we want to be in Prabhupada's presence, that's what we had. That's where he put his heart and soul into his Bhaktivedanta purports. That's the ultimate answer. But Prabhupada knew that we were so much in the bodily conception that we needed an example of Krishna consciousness that we read in the books. We need an example of a person Bhagavat. In what is it, Bhagavatam 1.2.18, Nityang Bhagavata Sevaya, and the purport Prabhupada talks about there's two kinds of Bhagavats, the book Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat. So Prabhupada knew that we needed his personal encouragement just to launch the Hare Krishna movement, because we didn't know anything. We didn't know how to clean ourselves. We didn't know how to eat. We didn't know how to do anything. He had to train us like babies. Prabhupada called 26 Second Avenue his first ashram, a spiritual kindergarten. So that's so Prabhupada actually sacrificed his body on the altar of traveling and preaching. Prabhupada practically just wore his body out doing that. And he was always in anxiety what would happen after he did leave this world. And that's how the Kaviraj diagnosed his illness at the end. Too much anxiety over movement and disciples. And Prabhupada concurred. Yes, you have diagnosed correctly. So now, since Prabhupada left this world, we're all feeling like orphans, right? We're all feeling we're missing him. But I'll tell you, by the mercy of Prabhupada, who always insisted from day one, even before day one, when he was all alone in New York City, what's the first recording we have? February 19th, 1966, Prabhupada dictating what became the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita. That's the very first recording. And when you listen to that recording, how does it start? Mangalacharana. Om Agana Tibirandhasya Ganam Ganasalakaya. It's Prabhupada. It sounds like, primeval sounds from the dawn of creation. And just by associating with Prabhupada through those recordings, and now so many memories videos and following Srila Prabhupada videos, and we have more access to Srila Prabhupada through his recordings and his videos than we ever did when he was walking around among us. We would only get a little a little snapshot of Prabhupada's Leela when he was, most of us, when he was walking among us. And then, letters would float in, those pale blue aerograms from India would float in, and we'd all gather around and we'd live on those letters. It's such a study in management, how Prabhupada managed a worldwide movement before email, before fax or telex or anything. He would just write these letters, almost 7,000 of them. And they would float in, and we would all just live for those letters. And of course, live for the times on an average once a year when he'd come by our part of the world. And he would always say, "So is everything all right?" We might have been half dead from anxiety or just from struggling just to try to follow the 4 regulative principles or chant 16 rounds. But when Prabhupada said that, "Is everything all right?" then everything became all right. Because to be in Prabhupada's presence it was like sitting down in Krishnaloka. Tirti Kurvanti Tirtani. He was a walking holy place. And suddenly everything was all right. And you forgot all your angst and you forgot all your, everything. So, yeah. So I think the message I want to convey to that answer is just know that by the mercy of Prabhupada insisting, even before he was with us, even that he be recorded, that we have access to him much more than when he was walking among us. And even when he was walking among us, if we're not actually focused on the instruction, on the Vani, then the Vapu wasn't enough. You're going to hear in a future lessons how I learned this powerful lesson about Vani and Vapu on a certain morning walk I went on with Prabhupada. Just know that. When Prabhupada was walking among us, I kept my distance because I was a little afraid of Prabhupada. As much as I loved him and appreciated him on one level, was thrilled to, be in his movement. But Prabhupada was like a roaring fire of Krishna consciousness. You're going to hear that in the last lesson of this series. And if you didn't become like him in his presence, it was too much. You couldn't take the heat. So I kept my distance, and I'm sort of glad I did. But in the 40-some years since his Tirobhav, because I've been trying to follow his instructions, I know him better now. I know him better than when he was walking among us, and I'm less afraid of Prabhupada, and I'm looking forward to meeting him someday. And more than ever, his first generation of followers is leaving this world. It's in ever increasing numbers, following Prabhupada out of this world, hoping to go to his lotus feet. So just know that Prabhupada is more available than ever through these retrieval systems of videos and recordings, and what to speak of the Bhaktivedanta database. And they put it all in the latest version of the database. They have all the recordings there now, not just the transcripts. So let's take advantage of Prabhupada's instructions in very powerful ways. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Sureshwar Prabhu. This is Bhakti Vinod Das. We have met at least once or twice. I heard your lectures in Mayapur. I'm from Chandigarh.
Acha.
So I've read your articles also in Back to Godhead, describing Prabhupada's, what is his Prabhupada's qualities are. Wonderful. I have a small information to share with you. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Next year in India, we are planning to have Prabhupada's 125th birthday anniversary celebration. And we are trying to have a lot of people participate in it by way of writing essays about him and some quiz about him. Would it be for teenagers? What would be a suitable topics for teenagers to write essays on?
Aha. Essays about Prabhupada?
Yeah, for teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
What would be a suitable
sure.
topic?
Well, you know, what we've just been discussing is very important. The first question Bhaktivinoda Maharaj asked about how we're all foundationally deep down Prabhupada Nugas, how that's true. That's practically the most important message of my seminar series, because that's how ISKCON is going to continue. How we're all connected to Srila Prabhupada, just different generations. Seniors instruct juniors, and it's the duty of the current generation to imbibe from the previous generation, so you can pass on the same experience by hearing of Prabhupada. Most of the Prabhupada stories I tell, I didn't witness. I just heard them on the memories DVDs or on the Following Srila Prabhupada. Because again, we only got a little piece of Prabhupada individually. But when you hear all these collective memories, then the full Prabhupada emerges. His full mercy emerges. So I would say, yeah, that how we're all connected to Prabhupada by Vani, and also the next Prabhu asked the question, how can we remember him now? It's practically the same answer. And here's something else I can share with you, Prabhu, that Hari Shari Prabhu has this series, which is now, I believe it's in the public domain, but Hari Shari Prabhu used to travel around the world from, say, early 2000s, yeah, maybe for 5 years or so. He was teaching this Srila Prabhupada, the Living Bhagavatam series. And what he would do is he would share his experience of being Prabhupada's servant for some 16 months. And of course, he kept the best diary. So we have these multi-volume diaries. And so when he would do these seminars, he would share Prabhupada by themes. And if you make a note of this, I think I can remember the themes. Prabhupada on chanting. Prabhupada on health. Prabhupada on prasadam. Prabhupada on deity worship. Prabhupada on the books. Let's see, a couple of more. I think Prabhupada, he would tell about how it was to travel with Prabhupada, traveling. There might be one or two more, but those are some ideas, themes that you can give them to write on.
Yeah, looks very suitable.
Yeah. Okay. So good luck with that. And if you're also inviting old guys like me, and you can Zoom me in, maybe I can participate just like you're Zooming me in now. So
are you planning to come to India next year?
Well, is anybody going to come to India next year? That's the question, right? I mean, the way India and America are, they're the worst places for COVID, right? It's just super hot.
Correct.
So who knows? Maybe we're not actually counting on it.
Okay.
You know, to go. Yeah, but you can always Zoom me in. You can. It's like Star Trek, right? Beam me up, Scotty, or beam me in. So you could beam me over to Chandigarh.
There's a hand raised and your video is not visible to us, Prabhuji.
Who's that?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Can you hear
not
me?
visible to us.
Hare Krishna. Mataji.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Can you hear me?
Yes. Are you telling me, Prabhu, that my video is off or something?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, so let me, I see that. Somehow it got turned on. Okay, is that better? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Mataji.
Yes. I have a question based on the material world, Prabhuji. So we are in business and we find it very difficult we have this purity of purpose when we start a company, and then when we, hire more people and and then as we talk to them and our mission, goes to different employees, it's diluted, it gets diluted. So how can, over the last 50 years, ISKCON has managed to keep that purity of purpose and not dilute it, and use technology to enhance it even. So how does that work? Are we missing something in the material world, or does this happen only because Krishna is involved? Is there like a gap or something that we are missing?
Are you talking about ISKCON now? How to keep ISKCON on mission?
Oh no, how do we do that in the material world also? How do we keep that purity of vision intact and as we go about our business?
I've never been a businessman, but by analogy, I would rather connect your question to ISKCON, because that's specifically why I'm here. I mean, to talk about Prabhupada and ISKCON. But that's the tendency of the material world. What are the scientists? They have this term called entropy, E-N-T-R-O-P-Y. It's the phenomenon how matter tends to go to a state of wholeness, integrity, to a state of dispersion and chaos. That's the natural tendency. So the only way to prevent that happening to ISKCON is to keep us in the spiritual energy by always focusing on Prabhupada's Vani. And that's practically why, before COVID hit, I was always traveling around the world, at least 4 months a year, doing these seminars. Because as things, as you say, become bigger and more complex and more diverse, that's the tendency for things to, what they talk about mission drift in corporate culture. So I can't advise you. I mean, there are so many devotees more qualified than I to talk about business. But the only way to prevent mission drift is to go right back to the foundational principles. And if you folks, you said you and your husband maybe were the founders, is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, you're lucky because you're still alive. You're still alive to get it back to basics, get it back to square one, get it back to what the purpose is. So that's really all I have to say. And that's why when I travel, I focus on 4 things: Prabhupada's life, his teachings, his mood, and his mission. And when we do that in ISKCON, we're always just whatever God family we're in, or whatever zone or generation, when we're always focused on the life, teachings, mood, and mission of the founder Achraya, we have a good chance of actually increasing and improving and refining and expanding everything per the original mission statement, mission vision. Otherwise, things always, just like Krishna says to Arjuna, Sakale Neha Mahata. Due course of time, the science was lost. So Krishna said, I have to restate this to you. But I'm going to defer to our business-minded gurus in ISKCON who really, I've noticed the SPT, the strategic planning team, when they send out these emails all over the world, and they do have, sometimes they have these business seminars of how to do things in a Krishna conscious way. I'm sorry, Mataji, I just, I don't have a business bone in my body, so I can't tell you more than that.
Thank you for answering my question.
Very soon, His Holiness Bhaktivinoda Swami Maharaj will be addressing a seminar on spirituality and business leadership.
Good. Who is that? Who is that?
His Holiness Bhaktivinoda Swami Maharaj will be addressing.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
I'm just reminded of it.
So take care of business, Maharaj. Okay, how are we doing? Are there any other, we're past the hour, but if there's any pressing questions, I can go a little longer.
Anybody else? Or is there a question on chat? No?
There's one more hand raised.
Okay. Anjana.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Can you hear me?
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhuji. Please accept my humble obeisances, Prabhuji. My question for today is how to choose our spiritual master, because often we are confused in ISKCON. Like when we see all the spiritual masters are wonderful in their devotion to Krishna and Guru. So please advise on this.
Boy, that's another seminar, isn't it? In fact, in my seminar series, I teach a whole lesson on that. Well, actually, the lesson is called Finding Our Mission in His Mission. But because spiritual masters play such important roles in that, I could have just as easily called it, and I'm considering actually changing the name to Finding Our Mentors in His Mission. If we're fortunate in ISKCON, when we first come in, from the get-go, our seniors, the senior devotees, will insist on immersing us, again, in Prabhupada's life, teachings, mood, and mission. And once we get a little accustomed to that identity as being a Prabhupada Nuga, then, and it takes time. It takes time. I'm always very, I'm very conservative in this regard. I encourage people who've come into ISKCON, if I ever meet a brand new newcomer, I say, well, take your time, get to know Srila Prabhupada, get to know his written word, get to know his spoken word, which nicely complements the written word, get to know all the different aspects of his mission. There's so many aspects. Because Prabhupada himself, whenever someone would come to him, say it was a newcomer, if the person was really ready, was sincere, then Prabhupada would say, well, what do you like to do? What would you like to do for Krishna? Because we all have a different swabhav, swakarma, swadharma, and a different nature. And in Gita, Krishna says in 18:45-46 that we attain perfection by following our own work. We all have a certain part to play, a certain offering to make. So once we get to know, I encourage people to be in what I call the Prabhupada boot camp, the basic training camp, for as long as it's necessary to really understand that I am foundationally Prabhupada's Shiksha follower. And then once we're a little mature and secure in that identity, and of course that doesn't happen in a bubble all the time, as you're suggesting. There are so many wonderful devotees in this movement. Then we can begin to see who can perhaps help me perfect that offering I'd like to make to Srila Prabhupada. It's like after 5 years in Prabhupada's movement, I began to see, after distributing books for some years and doing different things, we should all be exposed to different aspects of devotional service in the boot camp. But then there's going to be a time when we'll want to focus. Just like you go to school, right? You take general education requirements, and then you focus on your major. There's general electives, and then there's concentration. So then you begin to concentrate on what your offering is, and then you look around and you see what Gurudev or Guru Maharaj perhaps is also very involved in that aspect of Prabhupada's mission. Who's involved, say, in congregational preaching? Who's involved in rural community development, Varnashram? Who's really focused on perfecting and spreading all over the world deity worship? Who's really focused? I love to cook. So not me, but say I was that person. I'm very much a non-cook. But who's an Achraya in Prabhupada's prasadam mission? And believe me, Prabhupada, that was a big part of the mission. So then you might gravitate toward personalities who are focused on that aspect. And then you might approach such a personality. But even if you do, I always say that for someone to really take initiation and for it to really work over the long haul, that there has to be some what I call spiritual chemistry. Prabhupada talked about this in Honolulu, Hawaii in January 1974. It was a Bhagavatam lecture. And he said, so the guru has to examine the disciple. This is right from Hari Bhaktivilas, mutual examination process. And then the disciple has to examine the guru. The prospective disciple and the prospective guru, they have to mutually examine each other. Because even if they're both bona fide, even if the candidate is sincere and the guru is strictly following, he's bona fide, but are they going to work as guru and disciple? It depends. Sometimes on natures too, right? So then the Prabhupada said, so the guru, so the disciple, potential disciple thinks, here is a person I could really surrender to. I could really surrender. This person can be my guru. And the guru is thinking, here is a person whom I could really work with, accept as my disciple. And then Prabhupada said, and then if they both have that mutual feeling and understanding, then Prabhupada said, then the business is nice. In other words, if there's a thorough vetting, if there's a thorough examination on both sides, if it's not just fly by night, if it's not just sentimental, oh, Guruji, he looked at me and I knew from the moment the way he looked at me that he was for me. No, that's an initial sentiment. Let's test that, all right? Or the gurus think, oh, such a nice person, so educated, so this and that. Yeah, I'd like to have that person as a disciple. But that's just superficial. Let's test that. And that takes time. So I always encourage people to take their sweet time, not to avoid initiation, and not to jump into it prematurely. We should not avoid Diksha, and we should not, just rush into it prematurely. But we should take our time, and then it becomes clear. Krishna makes it clear in the heart of both the prospective disciple and the prospective guru. It's not about, if you've taken the disciple's course, you'll know that it's not about peer pressure. Oh, why don't you take initiation from so-and-so Maharaj or so-and-so Prabhu? It's not like that. It shouldn't be pressured. It's not about geography. We went through that in the 1980s, the so-called zonal Achraya debacle, Holocaust catastrophe. It's not a personality cult. It's about what person actually are you going to develop a real close relationship with to connect to Prabhupada and Prabhupada's mission and the whole parampara going all the way back to Krishna. So it's a very serious thing. In fact, in the first recorded Gita lecture Prabhupada ever gave in March 1972 in the Bowery, in the depths of the Lower East Side of New York City, Prabhupada even compared a guru and a disciple examining each other to a boy and a girl considering marriage. He said, just because you have a very nice boy and a very nice girl, that doesn't mean that they could be married. It just means that they're each very nice people. But to be married, you have to really test the compatibility. Yeah, mutual examination. So I hope that helps. And I think I'll end there. It's getting a little late where I am. But next time, the theme of the Leela, the theme this time was initiation. All the different things that happened around my initiation. And then next time, the theme will be deity installation. I had the privilege of being present at least one time, when Prabhupada installed deities. And the deities were in Dallas, Texas. And the deities are called Sri Sri Radha Kalachandji. So many things happened around that weekend that Prabhupada installed Sri Sri Radha Kalachandji. So that's next time, and that'll be, I believe, next Friday, correct?
Yes. 15th October, yes.
Yes, okay. Well, thank you so much. It's always wonderful being in the presence of you cultured folks in South India. Here we are in the desert in the Southwest USA. It's a real cultural desert, but just being with you is a real treat and a privilege and an honor. Thank you so much.
Haribol Prabhu.
Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you very much, great Sureshvara Prabhu, for being with us this evening, sharing your time, and more than anything, sharing your wonderful realizations and your very delectable, sweet association with Bhakti
Where
Vedanta.
are you? Are you in Arizona? Where are you?
Thank you very much for...
Prabhu, where are you?
The arid zone, yes, the arid zone, the desert, Arizona, the arid zone.
Tucson. I visited him in Tucson once.
Tucson,
we were together.
Yes.
They have a nice restaurant there with that Mataji. I think,
yes. Sandamani. Yeah.
Yes. Right. So thank you very much, Prabhu, for being here. And it's really a great experience. And we look forward to the next Friday, wherein we can also dive and swim in the waters of Srila Prabhupada's mercy and association. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Srila Prabhupada. Ki Jai.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Haribol, Hare Krishna. Good night.
பிரபு நீங்க எப்படி லாகின் பண்ணிருந்தீங்க பிரபு? மதுகோபால் பிரபு.
ஹரே கிருஷ்ண பிரபு.
பிரபு நீங்க அம்பரீஷ் நேம்லயே லாகின் பண்ணிருந்தீங்க பிரபு?
இல்ல, அம்பரீஷ் இருந்தாரு பிரபு முதல்ல. அதுக்கப்புறம் நான் வந்தேன்.
உங்களை கூப்பிட்டேன் பிரபு, நீங்க முதல்ல இல்ல போல இருக்கு அந்த டைமுக்கு. சரி சரிங்க, ஓகே. அவர் கேட்டாரு பிரபு, கேட்டார்.
ஓ சரி ப்ரோ, சரி.
Next.
Thanks,